Chapter 2, Part 1. If you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. Start by planning. Gardening takes time and patience, but above all, it needs planning. So start planning now. The most important step is deciding what you want to grow. Only once you know this can you know what size containers or beds you'll need, the best area to place them, what soil mix they will need, and what should be grown together. Next, decide on your method of propagation. This is another way of saying which way do you want to grow your plants. We will be covering sexual and asexual methods, which basically means growing from seed and growing from offcuts or from a parent plant. If you're wanting to get a head start on the growing season and avoid a late frost, some seeds can go into trays, although some can go straight into the ground. Plants grown from parent plants will need pots and soil, and you will need time for the offcuts to grow roots before they can go into the ground. If you are good at keeping a diary, start writing things down. You'll be surprised at how quickly you forget which seedlings should be planted in which bed and which beds have exactly what seeds planted directly in them. I've mapped out the beds on a spreadsheet, but if you don't have access to a computer, an old plastic container cut into strips makes great name tags to remind you of what is growing where. To help yourself formulate a plan, ask yourself these simple questions and then write down the answers in your diary. Firstly, who? Who's going to assist you? Or do you have the time and energy to do this alone? I would suggest getting your community involved. As a group, you can share the costs of seeds, plus if space is limited, you could split the crops and focus on a companion group each, sharing the spoils of the harvest. When? As far as I'm concerned, as soon as possible is the only answer. The growing season extends throughout most of the year, so considering the ever-increasing food prices, right now is the best time to get started with composting and preparing your soil and beds. And once they are ready, plant the crops that are best for that season. Where? Most vegetables will need at least 6 hours a day of direct sun. Luckily, most areas in South Africa average more than 2,500 hours of sunshine per year. Sometimes you just need to find it. If you're in an apartment, use your balcony or a sunny window. If your yard is not north-facing or is in shadow, try the roof. What? Decide on what you plan to grow and what you plan to grow together. This will determine the size of your beds, their depth, and what soil mix they should be filled with. Once you have an idea of the size of the beds or containers you'll be using, you can see how many of each crop you can grow without the plants competing, which will let you calculate how far the harvest will stretch and whether you should plant twice in the season. Remember, if your family hates onions, rather don't grow them. If you're growing to sell, choose high-yield crops that are popular as fresh produce in the community. If you're growing for the community, focus on what grows best in your hardiness zones. Certain vegetables will thrive in your hardiness zone and respond well to the seasonal rainfall. Others may do more than survive, but not thrive. How? What method is best for you? Raised beds, pots, boxes, tires or bags? With good soil, sunlight, enough water and air, and enough love and care, vegetables will grow almost anywhere. And in pretty much anything, from in the ground to modified plastic bottles on the wall. You will need to choose what is right for you according to where you are and what you have. If space is limited, plan to grow upwards rather than out, remembering to consider the shadows tall or climbing crops will cast on other plants. Why? Is this a hobby or is your need more urgent? Do you want to supplement your diet with organic food? Do you want to feed school kids or feed your family? Or do you plan to focus on specific crops to trade or sell? If it's a hobby, you might want beds as a centerpiece. If it's to supplement your diet, you'll be less concerned about materials and more concerned about produce and the yield. If it's to feed your family, school or community as a main source of nutrition, you'll need bigger beds, more variety, access to water and space, and a lot of assistance. What thereafter? For vegetables that do not store well, staggering planting will allow for a second or even third harvest, depending when you plant. This will provide a steady flow throughout the season. Allowing some plants to go to seed will provide a supply for the following season. Growing excess vegetables that can be preserved or stored will provide a supply for the months between seasons. In formulating my plan, I first consulted with a family member who's a lot more qualified and experienced than I am. I showed her what I had and where I planned to build the new raised beds, and explained why. Looking for the best location for my new beds, I began tracking the sun on the 21st of June, which is the winter solstice. This is the shortest day of the year, with the least amount of sunlight, and the day that the southern hemisphere is furthest away from the sun. Following the sunrise and the arc of the sun on this day allowed me to see the length of the shadows cast by the trees. With the sun lowest to the horizon on this day, this is the longest these shadows will be. Once the sun was higher in the sky during spring and summer, I could see that the area I chose would get the maximum amount of sun. Next, we discussed the methods of propagation I planned to use and how I planned on feeding the soil and the plants. If you have a family member, a neighbor, or know someone in your community who knows more than you do, don't be scared to ask. The best gardeners are always those who have years of experience of getting their hands dirty. So they will always have good advice and first-hand knowledge on what plants will thrive in your zone. She agreed the plan was solid, so next we discussed my choice of crops and why I chose them, which we discussed in the next video.